Hello and welcome to GNN, a weekly Fallout-themed podcast brought to you by Shoddycast, makers of Hidden History, Elder Scrolls Lore, and The Storyteller, a Fallout lore series. I'm your host, Charles Battersby. And with me is my co-host,
Austin Horrigan.
And we have a pretty big news week this week. A whole bunch of interesting things happened. We, of course, have the new special video on charisma. And also last week, right after we recorded, at the exact moment that our video went live, the bastards at Bethesda decided to release their big video on how the new perk system is going to work. So we're going to talk about that. And through no small coincidence, the perk video focused on what the charisma perks are going to be like. So we'll discuss them in detail today. And some of you lucky bastards out there are currently holding the Ultimate Collection of the first 5 Fallout games. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And there's some minutia that we'll get into later in the podcast. But for now, let's plug something that Austin and I just did. Austin, tell the gang about what happened Saturday and what they can listen to right now.
We invaded our arch rival ham radio podcast with Mr. Matty, the Lone Vault Wanderer, and a guy named Noah who likes to tell people to shut up sometimes.
So if you'd like to hear us talk for 2 hours on last week's news with the gang at our rival podcast, then head over to Ham Radio on Mr. Matty Plays right now. And now another bit of news that happened last week, even as we were recording, was the Loot Crate Fallout Crate was released. Austin, what did you think of Loot Crate's Fallout edition?
That's a bit mean, but we actually had talked about this last week, but it got cut because it sold out like almost right away. It did not stick around for too terribly long, but it's I believe $100, and the things that people we don't know all the contents even still. I don't believe, right? It's a hoodie. We know about the hoodie,
a $60 hoodie on the Bethesda store.
And then they talk about it being like $150 worth of things, but price is a very subjective thing. And
I'd pay $135 for that stuffed dog meat alone. Yeah, I don't think it's really coming back, no matter how much of an F5 junkie you are. But I was very disappointed in it. I was under the assumption that it would be a $20 box like the regular loot crates, and then $100. We talked about this on the ham radio a little bit. $100 is a lot of money for a mystery box, yes. Whereas $20, it's a little impulse buy. I didn't grab this, but when it comes out and it's been revealed, we'll look at all our friends that have their unboxing videos, and then we'll talk about our opinions on it. Right, and before we get into discussion of the new Charisma video, I have something of my own to shamelessly plug. I will be doing 2 panels at the New York Comic-Con next week on Friday the 9th. I'll be moderating a panel on the history of cosplay. That's going to be at 6:45. It's called In My Day, We Didn't Have Cosplay. And so it'll be me, a few other famous cosplayers, and some people who've been in the comic industry for a while. And we'll be talking about what cosplay was like in the old days, dating back to the 1930s. And I will be cosplaying as a character from Fallout during Comic-Con, so if you show up on the right day, you will be able to see me cosplaying in I won't say what it is, but a Fallout thing.
He's going to be a talking Deathclaw.
Yeah, I will be a life-size Deathclaw, 9 feet tall, running around the convention center. And also on Saturday, I'm doing another panel called Secret Identities, Creating Transgender Characters in Comic Books. So that'll be at 5:15 on Saturday, if you'd like to stop in and have a look at that too.
Also in the news is people have been starting to get their ultimate collections with the mini nuke.
So Austin, what did you think of this mini nuke? There have been a lot of unboxing videos of this. If someone already owns all the Fallout games, is the mini nuke alone something that they should have grabbed?
This is, I realize that I have a different value system when it comes to these things than like a lot of other people, because to me it's always like, nah, I got a lot of crap already. It makes another thing to dust. But it looks pretty cool to me. The people who got them don't seem to be too disappointed with them. But if you're the kind of person that just thinks like, oh, this is a good way to get a bunch of the games, I stick with it was probably better to steer clear. What about you, Charles?
I thought that the mini nuke was underwhelming. I'm a crafty person myself, so as I look at this, I'm like, I could just get like a big egg-shaped thing and then paint it green and then paint the yellow stripe on it, and I'm like, yeah, it's my mini nuke. And, then my Steam account has all my Fallout games anyway,
Right.
so I don't need a physical receptacle for the discs.
You could put your imaginary data in there. You could install them all in a thumb drive and just tuck it in the little slot there. So now the Charisma video has gone live.
Yes, mere minutes ago. All right, so those of you who avidly watch Bethesda's YouTube channel, you saw the perks video last week where they outlined all 10 of the Charisma perks. So there's not much in this video that's a surprise, even though it is very whimsical watching people get stabbed in the eye with forks. So Austin, what was revealed in this video that you didn't think was going to happen?
Well, okay. There's a few things that they mentioned that were interesting to me, but I have some reservations about them that I'll get into in a minute. I thought the concept of follower loyalty was interesting. The little sentence about convincing other people to do things for you was neat. I'm not surprised that it also controls the perks that have to do with how you interact with dog meat. The thing that I'm, I guess, a little hesitant about is like, is follower loyalty just gonna be like, oh, the old school, your follower won't run away panicked when they get low on health thing, and then the convincing other people to do stuff for you, I'm a little bit, my fear is that is, the video is trumping it up as something more than it is. Maybe there's just like 2 quests where you can talk someone into doing something with a speech check. And if that's the case, I'm not actually all that impressed. But if it's actually some sort of mechanic where you can be like, hey, you should go do this. I don't know how that would be a mechanic. But if it were a mechanic, I could get behind that. And if it was some interesting mechanic there. But if it's just a speech check thing, it's nothing new and that's surprising.
All right, well, I think that's referring to something that was hinted at in the previous perk video. If you look super close at the perk video when they're highlighting all the different charisma perks, you'll see that there's one perk that lets you aim a weapon at an animal to, quote, pacify it, and another that lets you do that to critters, and then, the ultimate charisma perk is being able to aim your gun at a human and then, quote, pacify them. But if you look at where they upgrade these, you'll see that you'll, as you take different levels in each of these perks, you'll apparently be able to issue commands to bad guys that you've pacified.
That's
and so
pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think that's what they're talking about when they say things like, you'll have more loyal companions, or you'll be able to get people to do your bidding. So I think that, as you level up each of these different perks, you'll be able to issue a broader range of commands to your companions or people that you're manipulating.
And it seems as though I'm seeing this happen. This is evidenced in the perception perk, or not perk, the perception skill special as well, attribute, that's what it is. They seem to be trying to rebalance special so that you're not quite as locked into certain play styles if you choose to emphasize a skill set. Like, if you were going to be a speech charisma-y type person in the past, that basically meant that you were never going to fight ever, and there was no real combat utility to charisma at all, other than, you have a companion, and some companions you can get more easily with a speech check than otherwise having to do a quest or pay them. So I kind of like the idea of charisma actually having a wider application. I'm hoping to see this progress down the line. Maybe intelligence is actually going to have something as well. I was pleasantly surprised about that it's a more active skill than it has been in the past.
Yeah, and it also falls into that road warrior sensibility where Max is running around with his gun for the first half of the movie, and just by pointing the gun at people, he can get them to do stuff, and he doesn't have to engage in combat. And, spoiler alert, we learned that Max's gun is empty. So it's kind of interesting that they are taking that aspect of a classic storyline from Road Warrior and then incorporating that into the game.
I do like the idea of being able to pacify your enemies, because it's kind of stupid. Like, I mean, in old school games, I hate to be calling Fallout 3 old school because, yeesh, that makes me feel old. But you know, it's the previous 2 generations ago, basically. You couldn't really, it'd be really, I mean, maybe you could mod it in now, but it would never really be quite fluid to have a stick 'em up, I surprised ya. But in real life, like, if you catch someone with their pants down and you have a gun, like, they're not gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna draw my weapon, I think I can, you know, come out ahead on this. So
I have 1 hit point left, I'll attack with everything.
It's totally ridiculous. So I do like to see something like that happening. To me, it makes me want to play a character who emphasizes like sneaking and charisma, so I can just sneak up on people and then be like, hey, do my thing. And they'll be like, oh, okay.
Oh, and something that I thought was peculiar about charisma is that one of the perks is the lone wanderer. So if you have no companions at all, somehow your charisma still provides a benefit to you. All right, so now if you have a level 2 charisma, the absolute lowest, worthless perk in this chart is barter. And for me, barter is arguably the worst skill in all the Fallout games, that you get so much stuff and so much money over the course of these games that there is no reason to bother with the barter skill. So in the previous games, you know, that was one of the 2 things that was tied to charisma. So basically, if you chose charisma as an important skill, you were just getting it for speech. Austin, what did you think about bartering in the previous game?
You know, so this is funny because I remember Brian Delaney saying that he blew up Megaton for the caps. And that to me just betrayed a significant inexperience with Fallout 3, because in Fallout 3, it's the worst for me. No matter what my barter skill is, I am rolling in caps, always. And sometimes having too high of a barter skill meant that I just had to go to more shopkeepers to unload my crap half the time. And so, yeah, I wouldn't call it useless. It made some stuff nicer, like when you were making those really big purchases, like the upgrades to your home, it kind of had a benefit. But yeah, it was one of those things that it didn't make as big a difference as it probably should have in the game. Like, barter, arguably, I think, should make it so that, you know, if you're too low in it, you're not good enough at it, you're never going to be able to sell that piece of junk. Like who needs, like, an iron that doesn't work, you know?
Who wants this paperweight? Yeah, one thing in Fallout 3 that I noticed got struck from New Vegas is the impartial mediation perk. For those of you who never did this, if you had charisma of, I think, 5 and you were level 8 and neutral karma, you would get a 30% bonus to your speech skill. So this means you might still, you know, be doing Megaton quest in the first few hours of the game, and now you have a speech skill that's at near 100%, and for the rest of the game you could just kind of wander through the game and convince people to do whatever you wanted them to do with your 100% speech skill, and, you know, you just go up to people and like, sorry, I can't let you through the gate unless you do something for me first, and then you could just say, oh, come on!
I'm such a good guy!
Yeah, come on, it's me. And, you know, then you would just get, you could just completely avoid large quest lines just by, you know, walking straight up and talking to the main guy. And it's like, hey, come on, give me the codes to the reactor. We'll be fine.
I never took impartial mediation because it just looked like a hassle. Do you have to maintain a neutral karma in order for that to give you the bonus?
Yes, you do.
See, that would drive me up the wall, because so many enemies, like, randomly, like, will give you karma bonuses, or mostly bonuses. You go through the game just playing the game normal, you're gonna come out the other side with, like, a huge karma. So I imagine, like, if you end up beating the game, you know, and you still want to have your impartial mediation, you gotta go back and blow up Megaton and then, like, murder the Brotherhood of Steel, and then you're like, okay, now I can negotiate with all the dead bodies.
Yeah, when I was doing a pure neutral build, yeah, there were a lot of things where I'm like, you know, I've been acting a little too good lately. I'm just gonna shoot this merchant.
It's not really neutral or impartial. It's chaotic, crazy person.
Yeah, it's a deliberate choice to be evil from time to time. All right, so something I found out in just about all of the Fallout games is that it seems like speech checks and dialogue progression is what gets you the best ending to most quests. So even if you do a good karma ending that involves violence, like you just go kill all the bad guys or just assassinate the bad guy leader, you're technically getting the good ending. But there's usually a third or even a fourth ending where if you have a very high speech skill, you can talk down both sides of the conflict and reach some hidden mutually beneficial ending. And so I think this is what I'm going to call a writer bias, where the people that are writing the dialogues of the game just inherently want you to spend more time going through dialogue options than, using the stealth option or the combat option or, the fetch quest option. And so, Austin, do you think that the impartial mediation is like part of this? That it's the writers trying to get you to stick with their dialogue?
I think so, because here's the deal. Like, this was really evident in New Vegas's DLC, especially when you're dealing with Ulysses and the Divide. Like, oh man, that was like a speech check nightmare. But the reason it's so it's not just like the writers wanting to, the game developers wanting to reward you for having a speech build. Because if it were that, it would be like, oh, you could do all these complicated things, or you could also do the speech check thing. But no, usually it's like the best ending is locked out. You can't get it any other way most of the time, except for doing a speech check. Sometimes, like with Ulysses and a Divide, you could collect all his different recordings and journal entries and stuff. And sometimes it could work out here and there. But yeah, in general, it seems they really favor like the speech options. And yeah, I 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah, it was the same in Honest Hearts, too.
Yes.
If you're trying to pursue the good path, you still will, have to murder the bad guy's leader. Even if you don't want to fight him, if you're trying to, so it is, the writers trying to lock you into this. And in the main storyline, when you reach the final end boss, if you have, I think you need 95 or maybe 100% speech, you can just talk the general of the Legion into, going away without even having to fight him.
Which is ridiculous! It is utterly ridiculous that you can speech check Linnaeus. Or Lanius into backing down. The dude is a monster.
Yeah, I think the second to last check is him saying, actually, I have the strength to just crush you no matter what you say.
Which is true. Dude is a beast.
All right, so writer bias confirmed here, I think.
I say definitely confirmed.
All right, and so listeners, as you're playing through Fallout 4, look for this on your own to see if they're still doing this in Fallout 4, if there is a hidden speech resolution to certain plot lines. All right, and now there were a few other bits of news that came out this week. Most of them I'm just going to call minutia, where I'm not even sure why they're sending out press releases with this nonsense. But let's talk about some of it. The Fallout 4 file size for Xbox was revealed, and it's 28 gigabytes. And this raises the question of, does the file size of the game matter on modern consoles? There was a time when your Xbox 360 came with I think a 4 gigabyte little flash drive that you plugged in. But those days are, they're 8 years in the past. We're not doing that anymore. So 28 gigabytes. What do we learn from this, if anything?
I mean, the only way it really means much is if when you have multiple games installed, it can kind of add up, especially if you look at GTA, which has well over 50 gigabytes of hard drive space. But yeah, it doesn't mean as much as it used to, other than there's no way they're going to be distributing this on disc anymore.
Yeah, so I guess we are at a point where, is that massive day one update, even if you put the disc in your console, you're still going to have to plug into the internet and download 10 gigabytes of stuff on top of it?
The size, I don't think it means... I actually, to be entirely honest with you, with what they had said their inspirations were, I actually thought the size seemed a little on the small side, because they talked about how they were drawing inspiration from the new GTA and all these other games. So I was actually expecting almost twice the amount of space that it was taking up than what it is currently.
And so do you think that they're very well optimized with these bright, cartoony graphics?
I think there is something there to that. I mean, people have complained about the graphics looking dated, which, like, to me, I didn't even comprehend that. Like, when I looked at it, I was like, oh, look at those updated graphics, because it's a sandbox. It's not just, it's not. And there were if games that have way better graphics, like The Witcher 3, they have some optimization problems. They have really weird texture loading issues that have always kind of bugged me. Like when they change camera angles, textures will try to load like really fast because they unload when the camera's like out of range or something. So I'm actually okay with it being a little bit less graphically dense as long as it means a smoother experience. So I think 28 gigabytes might be indicative of some decent optimization, and maybe because that the graphics may be a little bit last generation.
So it's funny that you mentioned the old Grand Theft Auto games, where I would always notice that when I'm in the fastest car in the game, as I'm racing through the streets, it's like all the clutter and stuff that exists in the world is just generated in a little bubble around my car. Yeah. and it's like, they designed it so that with most cars this won't happen. You'll drive at precisely the speed that your Xbox or PlayStation needed to generate the world. But then you get in that one Lamborghini, and then suddenly you just see events popping into existence around you, and there are cars falling out of the sky, and these car crashes just suddenly appearing, and you even see clutter in this little circle that's generated around your car just a few feet ahead of you. So in Fallout, depending on what your settings are like on the PC, on an older PC, you might actually run ahead and see the grass popping up in a very small bubble around your character. All right, and another bit of news that came out this week is that there's going to be no timed DLC. Now, Austin, were you playing Fallout 3 when the DLC first launched?
I wasn't. I played on a Xbox 360 when it was just vanilla. And by the time I got it on PC way later, it was already Game of the Year edition. So no, I didn't. I missed that window.
I had the horrid misfortune of being one of the people that played the DLC when it came out on something called Games for Windows Live. So you players that don't know about this, Games for Windows Live was a sort of virus that Microsoft would install on your PC, and it would move around your save files. It was the way that they distributed the DLC for Fallout 3 when it first launched, because this was part of some timed DLC thing, and so you could only get it through Games for Windows, and you would have to pay this separate fee. You couldn't just get it on your Steam account. You had to go through this other program, and it was an absolute nightmare. So I'm very happy to see that there's no time DLC. They'll probably just, you'll be able to grab it on Steam right from the beginning. You'll be able to get it through, PlayStation Network or the Xbox Store. So this is something that, although it seems like a very minor piece of information, I am delighted that they're not making the same goddamn mistakes that they did, with Fallout 3. Austin?
It's all part of that awkward period that we're still kind of in, but, getting a little better, where developers are trying to figure out how to protect their distribution rights on things, and they were doing just awful. They were making everyone was making bad choices about how to protect their games and keep them from being pirated and distributing them well. And then I guess they realized that people will eventually always find a way.
Oh yeah, I mean with Fallout 3, when they first started putting out the DLC, you could buy a physical disc that would have one or two batches of DLC on it. And the problem with that is, once you've installed it, you don't actually need the physical disc anymore. You would have that little data file on your computer if you were on PC, and then you could just sell the disc or make multiple copies of that data file. So this was their effort to, I guess, get around piracy while actually, handing you, here is the thing that you can use to make as many copies of this as you want, and then you can just give this to other people. So that was a catastrophic decision, and that was in the months after the game first came out, and each of the pieces of, let's see, I think they put two pieces on a disc, and then released another disc with the next two pieces, and then the final thing had its own disc. It was ridiculous of them to do it, and that was on top of the Games for Windows Live fiasco.
I think something that some developers are learning, but not quite all of them have figured it out yet, is people who are going to pirate and they'll figure out a way to pirate. Most people pay for games because, it's the right thing to do, and it's, supporting commerce, and stealing doesn't feel good, and no amount of encryption protection is really gonna stop the people that really want to get their hands on it.
Right, so last week they released a couple of music tracks. One is the main theme, where we see that video of the composer playing in the piano in the Bethesda offices. But they also had a little second file that wasn't quite as overtly promoted. But if you go to Bethesda.net, you can see both of these music tracks. And one of them is called The Last Mariner. Austin, what did you think about this song?
I liked it. For those of you who hopped on ham radio, you know that, and I think that I what I didn't say on there, and I kind of came to the conclusion, is I think the reason I don't like the ambient music all that much of Fallout 3 is because I make videos on the internet that are Fallout videos, and I get sick and tired of hearing the same drony music all the time. So it was nice. It was nice. It was a little bit more ambitious than that. It had some actual ups and downs as opposed to being just kind of nothing. But I do understand the danger of making music that's in a game that you're probably going to be spending 80 plus hours in, too bombastic or, energetic. It's kind of like hearing the same pop song on the radio over and over again. You'll get sick of it. So I get it. I get why the music is a little unambitious sometimes, as I may call it. I don't think it's actually bad, but it was nice. It has a nice kick to it. I think I'm actually going to play it in the background here, and I don't think we'll get in too much trouble.
and so that's a balance between, what's on your Pip-Boy and what's ambient music in the actual game.
Yeah.
So with Fallout 4, we also had another little bit of minutia, the IMDb page updated with the actor playing the DJ, and also it updated with a couple minor characters. It's some guy that's had minor roles in a bunch of stuff is now going to be the male Bostonian, and so we've it's hey, some guy I don't know about's playing some guy in the game. I guess it's some guy. So the new DJ that's been revealed.
Yeah, he's been on. He's kind of I would call him a comedic supporting character in most stuff, but he's not an unknown. He's been in Community and Parks and Recreations, and I think he has another show he's on where he's more of a principal lead. He's pretty funny. He has a demo reel of his stuff on IMDb, and he's good. I'm actually kind of excited to have him as a DJ.
Yeah, and of course they don't tell you the DJ's name. He's just credited as DJ. So the character and persona of who we're going to get hasn't been revealed yet, but we do know that someone exists.
Oh, what if he's not actually the DJ? He's just someone named DJ? Just some random person.
I'm Derek Johnson. Folk call me DJ.
And now we're off to one of my favorite segments, Ask a Lore Nut, where you, our lovely, lovely viewers, will ask us a question about Fallout lore that is not quite big enough to make it into a storyteller episode, and not really, quite the right thing for Hidden History, but just something that two guys can jabber about for a bit. And so Joshua on Twitter, at TheCourier86, asks us, did the Apollo 11 moon landing occur in the Fallout universe? So, Charles, I'm going to actually pitch to you on this one because, as we discussed previously, I was a bit stupid on this topic, and luckily we dodged a bullet and I looked it up right before we did the podcast.
So in the Fallout storyline, they did have space travel, and by the year 2077, they were a little more advanced than we are in the real world in the 21st century. In Fallout 3, if you go to the National Mall, you will find Fallout versions of real-world places like the Smithsonian. And there, in the real-world Smithsonian, you would find the Apollo 11 and references to America's real-life space program. And in Fallout 3, they actually have a slightly different version of this. I think it's the Valiant 11 is their version of it, and they have a bunch of fictional people from their version of the 1960s who did something kind of like the real world space program. It's all tweaked just a little bit. So although the Apollo 11 didn't actually happen, they had the Valiant 11 and things that are very similar to America's Cold War space program. Yeah, so a lot of Fallout fans are angry that Mothership Zeta added in aliens as canonical, but aliens to some degree were always canonical.
Yeah.
In the older games, especially Fallout 2, you'll meet characters that directly reference America's pre-war space program, and that we did have some contact with alien technology. And in the games, the biomed gel, that's something that's been around I think, since Fallout 2. So it is definite and canonical that aliens exist and that humanity has had some limited contact with them. And now that we're learning more about how this new perk system is going to work and how the new special system is going to work, we want to know what our viewers are going to be doing with your build on the first time through the game. So, Austin, what is your first build in this game going to be?
Well, I was already leaning toward doing a sneaky build, but I didn't. You really don't just have one skill that you do primarily. You kind of have one or two. And so, with the reveal of Charisma being a little bit more interesting than it was in the past, I'm thinking I'm going to go with a sneaky, charming guy who just sneaks around and charms at people. I think that's going to be my general build. Or I'm going to go with a drug-addicted brawler type. I'm not really sure which.
Now, I've always found luck to be one of the most crucial aspects to playing a Fallout game. It just makes the game more whimsical and entertaining. So I think I'm actually going to make my first build a very high luck build with better than average charisma and agility, just because agility has previously been really important to the Fallout games. And you know, I tend to play games my first time through. I say I'm just going to bang through the main quest, and then I get distracted, and 100 hours later, I'm done. So for this time, I'm really, really seriously going to build a high luck character. I'm going to plow through the main storyline, and then I'm going to go back and do another build. And the next build I do is going to be high charisma and high luck.
Nice.
So viewers, what build do you think you're going to do your first time through? Let us know on Twitter and in the comments below. Now, next week, we know that the special video is going to be on intelligence, and it's been a couple of weeks since we've done an artsy-smartsy segment here. So in honor of the intelligence video, we're going to do artsy-smartsy on the most pretentious post-apocalyptic film I can find. It is a yes, it is a French film called Le Dernier Combat, translated in English often as The Final Battle or The Last Battle. So this is a 1983 black and white, mostly silent French film directed by Luc Besson. And even though I'm building it up as pretentious and something you probably won't like, it is an early movie by Luc Besson, who went on to do things like La Femme Nikita and The Fifth Element. So if you enjoy European action movies, this is something that you will probably really want to watch. And it has a little twist in the middle that explains why civilization collapsed. So we will be talking about that special twist. And if you have any interest at all in catching this movie, see it before next week when we'll go into detail about it. All right, and that's it for this week's edition of GNN. We'll be back next week with our discussion of the special intelligence video, along with all the news that happens in the next week, along with whatever video Bethesda released in the exact middle of this podcast that we're broadcasting right now.
I now know not to tempt fate and say that we've outsmarted Bethesda. Bethesda will always outsmart us.
Yes, they've actually hired two guys that look and sound exactly like us to do their own podcast, which is no doubt debuting in exactly 5 minutes. But in the meantime, I'm Charles Battersby. If you'd like to stalk me online, you can reach me at Charles Battersby with no Y on the end at Twitter or on charlesbattersby.com. And you can stalk me in the real world at the New York Comic Con next weekend, Friday the 9th and Saturday the 10th. Austin, where can people find you online?
People can find me at AR Horrigan on Twitter, and you can also tweet at the Shoddycast and right on our Facebook page. I will try to get back to you as quickly as I possibly can. Finding me in real life is a really tricky thing to do. I'm a little bit of a hermit, so you probably won't find me there unless you find me at the grocery store.
And don't forget, tweet us or ask us below about Ask a Lorenut, irresponsible speculations, and of course, let us know what build you're going to do your first time through Fallout 4.